Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
Congress skipped weekend votes, and the House has extended its recess through October 13th. What does all of that mean for the government shutdown resolution? We'll get more insight from WTOP's Capitol Hill correspondent, Mitchell Miller. Mitchell, thanks for joining me.
Absolutely.
There is so much going on the Hill. I don't know how you keep it all straight, but let's start with shutdown. What is the latest news?
Well, we're going to start this week just the way we started last week, which is more votes in the Senate on trying to end this government shutdown. We had 4 votes that took place last week on both the Democratic proposal that would have extended federal spending through the end of this month, and, of course, the Republican continuing resolution, which would extend spending through November 21st. Nothing really changed last week, and there hasn't really been a lot of change over the last 48 hours plus. These two sides are just dug in so deeply right now that I don't know what it's going to take to alter where we are at this moment. We had all of these votes essentially replicating themselves. You had 2 Democrats and an independent joining the Republicans. One Republican, Rand Paul, who often votes against these fiscal matters, sticking with Democrats in this case. But there hasn't really been a change. Senate Majority Leader John Thune had hoped to kind of chip away at the Democrats and hope to get some more votes during that series of votes, but that really hasn't happened. So Democrats holding firm on that demand to get negotiations on the health care issues that they say are really important.
There's been some buzz about back channel conversations. Are you hearing any of that? Is anything going to break loose from there?
Well, the only real discussions we've seen have actually been on the Senate floor, where you've had Democrats and Republicans at certain points getting together saying, what kind of framework can we work here? What can we do to move things ahead so that it's just not a daily back and forth of the blame game? And that's really the only thing that we have seen. We haven't heard a lot about whether there was some real firm proposal, for example, that they would get some kind of negotiation on this extension of the subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. Obviously, I think that's the area where it somehow at some point is going to break. There are many Republicans, particularly moderate Republicans in states that are affected by this, with millions of Americans potentially looking at their health insurance premiums going up. So that's the area where there seems to be some wiggle room. And the president, of course, is very sensitive to the politics of all of this. And there have been reports that he has more of an open ear on that issue, knowing that potentially could affect the midterm elections.
Well, while all of that is happening, it's a bit of a distraction from what's happening in OMB. The president has a new nickname for his OMB director, the Grim Reaper. So what is going on with that title and what OMB is trying to do behind the scenes?
Well, I think this is something that a lot of Democrats knew was coming down the pike, that there was a lot of discussion about Project 2025, of course, during the presidential election. The president, Donald Trump, at that time said he had nothing to do with Project 2025, but then he touted the fact that Russ Vought was involved with Project 2025 last week. So he has really, I think, embraced the conservative fiscal approach that Vought has taken, and we've seen it throughout this whole process over the last few months, whether it's DOGE cuts, whether it's threats to take away money. And of course, we saw a lot of that last week, where we saw that the administration just took back basically or halted infrastructure money going to Democrat-led states such as New York, such as Illinois, where there's been issues with Chicago. So I think we're going to see more and more of this. What it has been is, in the Democrats' view, something of a negotiating or a tactic by the administration. But the Democrats, at least for now, are holding on their position that they are not going to crack and they are not going to cave in the face of a lot of these threats, which do have people nervous. I talked to Virginia Congressman Don Beyer, a Democrat, and we asked him, are your constituents nervous about this? And he said, absolutely. I have people that want you to fight. And, we're really upset about all these cuts that have happened over the last few months. But then there are others that say a shutdown is just never a good deal.
I'm speaking with WTOP's Capitol Hill correspondent, Mitchell Miller. Mitchell, let's change topics a little bit, even though shutdown is on everyone's minds. The president issued a declaration last week that said that drug smugglers are foreign terrorist organizations and has continued to authorize strikes. How is that being received on the Hill, and what's the conversation there?
You know, that is an area where usually Republicans are in lockstep here in Congress, as you know, with President Trump. On this one, there is definitely some nervousness among Republicans who work on issues related to foreign affairs, related to the Armed Services Committee. A lot of people have questions about whether or not the executive can take the executive commander-in-chief, I should say, can take this unilaterally and just say, writ large, all of these organizations that I am touting as terrorist groups, I am going to take action against. And I think we're going to see some pushback there, definitely, of course, with Democrats. But I don't think that this is going to go without any kind of discussion, because it does have a lot of lawmakers on both sides of the aisle very nervous about this.
The president has declared basically war on drug smugglers, but that is something that Congress has to do.
Right. And that's what a lot of Democrats have pointed out for quite a while. A lot of Republicans have kind of demurred on that, at least publicly. But I think you're probably eventually going to see, if not floor speeches, you're going to see efforts to bring this up in congressional committees.
And there's one other thing I want to ask you about. The president has said he wants to redirect some of the tariff revenue to support farmers who are impacted by the tariff plans. So again, here we are in a shutdown, a resource-constrained environment. How is Congress responding to that opportunity?
Yeah, that's going to be a really interesting thing because, you know, you've had all of this money that has been cut. And I had just been talking with somebody on the Hill about that issue last week. We were saying at some point this is going to come up, that the farmers are really nervous about this. You have Republicans that represent a lot of these farmers in various states, in red states, for example. And yet at the same time, they're talking about at least $10 billion reportedly in money that might go to farmers. I think that there's going to be a fair amount of support related to that, but also a lot of questions like, how does this actually work? Where is this money really coming from? Is it just kind of a big fund that we can just draw from anytime that we hear complaints from the farm community? And of course, the fact that we haven't had a farm bill that has actually been passed in a long, long time has a lot of people concerned. So that is going to be getting a lot of attention.
Well, as you look towards the rest of the week, what are your expectations?
Well, I think we're going to see a little bit of Groundhog Day politically. We're going to see more of these votes. There may or may not be some changes. I don't really expect a lot of major changes related to that. And also, do we get more Democrats on the Senate side saying, well, you know what, we can't just keep doing this over and over again. We have to move forward. So I think that the wheels will grind ahead a little bit this week, but I'm still not that confident that we're going to see what we've seen in the past, where all of a sudden you see a lot of momentum for a breakthrough or some major talks. So I think this is potentially going to go on for a while. That's
Mitchell Miller, WTOP's Capitol Hill correspondent. I'm going to keep holding my breath, I think.
All right. Hold it for a long time.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Listen to the Federal Drive on your schedule. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.